All right, good morning, everyone. This is Eric here, and my dog is barking in the background. Um, Welcome to week 2 of the Hope Garden, and this week we're gonna continue talking about some of the basics for gardening. We're gonna talk about sunlight. We're gonna talk about how to make your own compost, as well as kind of how to read the little labels on the plants that you buy at the nursery, and kind of how to set things up and plan your garden out a little bit. So I'm here out in the front of my house here in Denver, and the front of my house faces east, the back of my house faces west. I have a small walkway on the north side, and then I have the street on the south side. So I'll kind of go around my property a little bit and kind of explain what type of sunlight my house gets, and kind of what you can do to kind of evaluate what's going to work best for your place. Cool? So here we go. Let's do it. Here's my chicken and my dog. One of my chickens, at least. That's Biscuit. She's the very first chicken that we have. She's almost 8 years old now. And she doesn't lay eggs anymore, but she rules the house for sure. So I am here in my backyard right now, and it's great because our house kind of blocks the morning sun, so we get a little bit of shade back here in the morning, and then as soon as that sun gets up over the house and starts to move west, it's full sun all day long. So it's really great for plants that are needing a lot of sun, as well as plants that might be like drought tolerant, and it's just something to kind of keep in mind, thinking how much sun are you going to get, and making sure you plant the right plant. Like, I wouldn't plant hostas back here because hostas love shade. So I did have a hosta in a container last year, and I just kept it on the north side of the house, and that's kind of how I plan things out. Here's the chicken. So the first step I would do would be to map out your property and figure out what cardinal directions your property faces, and that way you can kind of get a rough idea of how much sun you're going to get, and then take a day to kind of watch and see where the sun's going to hit. That'll take into account any trees that might cast any shadows, or large shrubs you might have, or maybe even your neighbor's house. An area might look really sunny at 8 in the morning, but then by midday, maybe it is totally in shade. So take a day to kind of figure out the path of sun on your property, and that can really help you figure out what plants are going to be good where. And then do a little bit of research. Group them by shade plants, part sun, and full sun. And that'll kind of help give you an idea of what to plant where, and then you can do some research, ask your staff at your local nursery, what are some good part sun perennials, or whatever. I always say when planting flowers, at least, or trying to landscape stuff, you're going to want to do a thriller, a filler, and a spiller. So thriller, thinking about kind of big statement pieces or big statement plants, and then fill it in with maybe some smaller stuff, and then have some kind of ground cover over. So that's always a good thing to remember. Thriller, filler, and then spiller. So now we're gonna go ahead and talk about actually planting a plant, and how to read the tags that are on the plant containers when you buy them. All right, so here are 3 different plant labels. I think we got this. You might find this at something like Home Depot. This is like a Miracle-Gro plant. So if you decide to buy your stuff from kind of the big box stores, a lot of your plant labels will look something like this. If you go to independent nurseries, so I live by City Floral, so a lot of the City Floral plants that are grown in-house there have their labels like this. And then there are other farmers that maybe have something like this. But generally they all have the same information on them. You'll get the plant type. So for these strawberries, these are Alpine White Souls. Zucchinis are Heirloom Black Beauties. And then the tomatoes are Indigo Rose. So you'll get the name. Sometimes you'll get the scientific name. So you'll get the genus and the phylum and the species and all of that, which is kind of nice if you're into that. And then generally on the back is where you're going to find the most information. The City Floral one here doesn't have anything on the back. And so if you have questions and you don't have all of the information on the label, just ask someone who works at the nursery and they can help you, especially with sun and watering information. But some of these more big box labels here on the back kind of give, at least for vegetables, will give you like a flavor profile and we'll write a little bit about it. And then it talks about the sun, the height, the spacing, and the water for the most part, and this is super helpful. There also might be some other references down here at the bottom, like websites you can go to. So for these strawberries, sun or part sun. So usually if it says or part sun, generally you're gonna wanna keep it a little bit protected, even if it says full sun. Because if they even have to bother putting or part sun, just know that the plant might be a little temperamental if it's blasted with sun and heat all day long. So for height and spacing, not too bad. So about 6 inches tall, and then you want to space them about 9 to 18 inches apart, just so they have enough room for their root systems to grow and they don't try to compete with each other. And then water weekly during dry spells. So pretty hardy, but just making sure, especially in Colorado where we already have a dry climate, making sure these guys are watered really well is important. So as you think about plants or as you start to browse at the plant store, what you want, just take a look at these and be able to read this. So for these zucchinis, let's look at the sun. So like full sun, 6 or more hours. So this does not say something like or part sun, like this is full sun. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you find a good spot that does get 6 or more hours of sun. Planting depth, container deep. It also has a maturation date on it, which is nice. Usually stuff like peppers and tomatoes and those types of things usually are around that 40 to 60 day range. So this is 48 days for these little zucchini squashes. And then going back to this guy, so this tells you kind of the type of tomato to expect. So for the Indigo Rose, you're looking for about 2-inch jet black colored tomatoes with red flesh. And I think this one was a 60 or 70 days. I can't read it right now, but there you go. So as you're going through, take a look at these labels and just kind of think about, what does your property have? What does your garden need? And does this plant fit the profile of where you want to plant it? Like maybe you found a really great perennial, like maybe like a hydrangea or something, but it's not gonna work where you want to plant it. So keep into consideration especially the sun, as well as, of course, soil type and water. Come here, Italy. Do you want to be in the video? Come here. Here's my dog. You probably have seen her at some staff meetings, some Zoom meetings. She helps guard the gardens, make sure that no one gets even remotely close to it. All right, so you have mapped out where you're gonna plant all of your stuff. You figured out your sunlight, you went to the nursery, you talked with the nice people there. They gave you so much wonderful information about the plant and where you're gonna plant it, and now you have it. So these are some pansies from the nursery, and we're gonna get them in the ground. So I think a lot of people get kind of confused about what to do. They're like, do I just put it in the ground? What do I do? And kind of, yeah, I mean, that's generally what you do. So based on the label, you're gonna wanna prep your soil, dig however deep you think it needs to be. And generally, a good rule of thumb is, depending on kind of how big the plant is, you're gonna wanna dig about twice as wide, twice as deep. So that way there's plenty of room for the roots to spread out. That's gonna be the biggest thing. For smaller plants, they definitely don't need as big of a hole, and you don't want the plant to end up being underground, but you want to give it a nice place to start thriving. So you'll dig a hole in the area where you want, and then kind of the most important thing is you're gonna want to kind of squeeze the container that it's in, because when you first get these are going to be pretty root bound. So the roots are going to fit the shape of the container that it's in, because that's what they've been growing in. And you're going to want to break that up and kind of free the roots so they start to spread and grow out. So you'll kind of squeeze the container, and then you'll kind of just let it slide out. And as you do that, a lot of the soil will start to break away, and you'll get kind of the main root ball. And what I then like to do is kind of take my hand like this and kind of try to do this over the gardens right now, is gently kind of shake away as much of that soil as possible, so that way when you put it into your garden, those roots are already able to spread out. So then I'll set it in there. You can add a little bit of plant food if you really want to, or some bone meal. My mom swears by bone meal. She puts it in everything she plants. And you can kind of get the roots to a place where they're not so bound up. So that way once they start to establish and grow, they'll be able to spread out a bit. And then water that sucker and then kind of let it be. Now, the first couple of days, you might get a little bit of transplant shock from your plants, especially if they have kind of bigger, softer leaves, or if they're a little bit more delicate, they might have a little bit of transplant shock. So they might kind of wilt a little bit, might look a little sad for the first day or so. Try not to panic. Make sure that it's getting enough water and enough sunlight, and then just monitor it over the next couple of days, and it should perk back up. If for some reason it doesn't perk up, something must have happened. But I think the important thing to remember is, like, do your best to nurture your plant, but sometimes plants die, and that's kind of the thing of it. You don't want to be too rough when you're transplanting, and you want to make sure that there is still some native soil. So usually when I take it out and start to brush away the excess soil, I try to let that native soil that it's been living in go into the hole that I'm digging in, so that way it's familiar territory, I guess you could say, for the plant. And especially if, like, my soil is different than the planting soil that it's in, we can kind of create a nice blend between the two. All right, so get your plants in the ground and then take care of them and watch them grow. And let's move on to the next topic: compost. All right, so now let's talk about compost. So there are kind of two ways that you can compost. One of them involves worms, and one of them involves just time and sunshine. So I'm going to show you both, because I do both at my house, and it's awesome. It's a great way to get rid of any food waste that you might have. It creates really awesome nutrients for your plants, and you can do it on a large scale, or you can do it on a really small scale. So it doesn't really matter if you live in an apartment or if you live in a tiny home, wherever you live. Like, you can still compost and still contribute to your garden in a positive way, as well as being mindful of your waste. So we have a large compost container out here in the back that we built a couple of years ago, and this one we just let sit. So We used a couple of pallets that we got for free from like Sam's or somewhere, King Soopers. We just asked if they had any pallets that we could have. And we built a little container, put some chicken wire in front of it, and just started to throw in any grass clippings or yard debris that we wanted to get rid of, any wood chips from the chicken coop. And we just made sure that it was in a really sunny place, and we just start to pile it on top of each other and water it every so often, and just kind of let everything start to decompose. Any kind of food waste we can toss in there every so often, and then we just use a little pitchfork to stir it up every so often. This process is pretty slow, so we're not going to get a lot of compost really quickly, but kind of seasonally we are able to get some good compost that we can use. But if you're looking for a little bit of a faster approach, also a way that you can get what's called compost tea, which is kind of like a natural fertilizer, you're going to want to do vermicomposting, which I am going to show you next. All right, so the second way you can compost is with what's called vermicomposting. And this is a really great way to not only get compost soil for your garden, but also to get compost tea, which you can use to help feed your plants. So it's kind of a double whammy, which is good. There's a bunch of different videos online. I'm gonna kind of walk through the basics of it real quick, and you can kind of make it fit your area. If you live in an apartment, this would be great to do like on a porch or a patio if you have one. If you don't have a patio or a porch or an outside area, maybe doing traditional composting might be better. So having a container, an airtight container where you just put all of your food waste and let it decompose there, that might be better. But for vermicomposting, you're gonna wanna grab 2 kind of plastic Tupperware containers that has a lid. So you need 1 lid and 2 containers. And you're gonna nest those 2 containers into each other. So make sure they're the same style of container, so that way it's a nice, good fit. And so what you're gonna do is on one of the containers, at about half of the way down, you're gonna drill some holes in the sides and the bottom. You don't want the holes to be up too high. You want them on the lower half of the container. So just with a standard drill bit, go in and get some holes in there so that way all of the liquid can drain out. So you will nest the container with the holes into the container without the holes. And then what you'll do is you'll get some shredded newspaper. You'll put a layer of shredded newspaper. I then like to use about a dozen eggshells that are all kind of broken up as another layer. I will get some compost from the garden center, just a little bit of compost in there, and start to fill it up, and then put in any food waste on top of there. So bottom layer is newspaper, then I do eggshells, then some dirt and food waste. So you're creating some really nice layers. Then what's gonna happen is you're gonna want to grab some worms. And you can order worms there are a couple of farms around town where you'll get just a big container of giant red worms, and they're awesome. It's gross, but it's cool. So what you'll do is you'll then toss the worms in with all of your stuff, and they will start to eat and poop and decompose all of that stuff much faster than if you were just letting your compost sit out to do its thing by itself. So the worms really help speed up the process. Also, what's great is the worms will poop out all of that stuff. All of that liquid will then drain into that bottom container, and then you can strain that stuff out and use it as this compost tea, which is just like a liquid fertilizer. When doing vermicomposting, you do want to make sure that your the stuff inside the container is nice and wet, so you'll need to water it every so often. And because of that, you don't want to put it in a super sunny area. I would say part sun, but well protected, because you don't want to fry the worms, and you don't want it to dry out, because if it dries out, then the worms will die as well. So we put it on the north side of our house where it's pretty shady, gets a little bit of sun, doesn't get too cold though, so it has good temperature. And then yeah, you just let those worms do their thing. And it's cool to watch, you know, after a month or so and you start to go in and stir it up a little bit, you can see that some of that stuff that you put in there is gone now, and now it's this really wonderful rich dirt. Then once you get that dirt, you can then go ahead and take it out, use it in your garden as soil, just as you normally would. So those are the two different ways that you can compost at home. You also can just use a small container that's airtight, put your food waste in there and keep it in the fridge, and it'll slowly start to decompose. And you know, it's all just a great way to give back to your garden all of those nutrients, and it helps kind of reduce our waste, and kind of lets us be a little bit more mindful. But any salads and stuff that we don't eat, or eggshells, are definitely a great additive to your soil. So putting eggshells into your compost bin is great. You also can boil eggshells for a little while and then strain it, and then the minerals from the eggshells can add some nice nutrients to your soil if you need that. All right, hopefully this week was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you got some good tips, and I can't wait to see all of your gardens and your compost bins and all of that stuff. So use the comment feature in the group to ask questions, connect with each other, and post photos. We'd love to see all that stuff. Next week, we are gonna be doing a live Zoom presentation for all of you, so we will make sure that link gets sent out, and we will make sure, or a Google Meet or whatever, we'll send that link out with that information, and we're going to be doing a live raffle for those who attend, so it's really important that you guys join us. We're going to be raffling off a container garden that we're going to build, and Paul is going to raffle off some plants, some compost tea, so there is a ton of stuff that we have to give away for you guys. So join us next week. Keep sharing this group with other people. Doesn't have to be Alameda staff, it can be anyone, friends, family, who live in different states, but we just want to build a great community of gardeners. And we're so excited to have you with us. Let us know if you have questions, and we'll be in touch. Have a great summer, guys.